Hello, welcome to Values, Virtues, Ethics and Morality. My name is Mangela Pillay, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you today in the studio with me, Sister Denise, who has been practicing Rajyoga Meditation with the Brahma Kumaris for over 40 years. Today, we are going to ask you to look at your own conscience, look at your own ethics, your own morals, your value system, and ask yourself the question, is the person that you are on the inside the same as the person that you are on the outside? And another question I would like you to consider is, are you harming yourself in any way, either physically, mentally, spiritually, etc.? This show is an in-depth look at the way we function as human beings, what is the impact of our conduct and our words on ourselves as well as the people around us and the environment. And to this end, I'd like to welcome Sister Denise in the studio today. Sister Denise, very warm welcome.
Thank you.
And today, brothers and sisters, we will be taking up the subject of personal power. Sister Denise, what is your definition of personal power?
Power is an ability, or the ability. I can means I have power. So personal power has to do with how the self thinks about the self. And personal weakness is where your real deep thought about yourself is filled with doubt, anguish, etc., etc. Personal power is when you have come to terms with all the different facets of yourself, your light, your dark, and everything. You come into your power. Also, that you have downloaded power from God, and that you are able to handle any kind of obstacle or difficulty or challenge easily and to get through to the next thing. I think that is personal power.
Sister Denise, if I look at what the world has become and a lot of people within my own circle, they kind of remind me of cell phone batteries where the beeping sound goes off that says need to be charged. Okay, am I wrong? Am I being judgmental in my assessment?
No, I think that everyone in the world is running on empty, and that everyone needs power. They're looking for power maybe in the wrong place. People who are looking for political power or financial power or military power or some other kind of power. But what we really need is personal power, which is spiritual power. And that you can only get from the source of spiritual power, which is the Supreme Spirit.
What is it within human beings that causes us to go to, when in our search for power, to the wrong places, and even though we don't find it there, we still continue looking at the same spot?
I think partly because you identify with matter, and when you're looking for power, you're looking out there in the material world and you're trying to see, well, where is power to be found? And you will look for physical manifestations of power. So this is the deception of the materialist paradigm, if you will, because you think that reality is physical, so you're looking for what you need in the physical world, but because yourself is a spiritual being, you cannot fill yourself with that. You can only fill yourself with spiritual power. And so eventually, when everything, all your options run out, maybe you'll decide, okay, what I'm really looking for is spiritual power, and then you'll start looking in the right place.
Okay, so We all think that reality is physical. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, reality is physical, but physical reality is not the totality of reality. So,
Oh, hold on. That's very, very loaded. Physical reality is not the totality of reality. Okay, go on.
physical reality is just one of the dimensions of reality where there is physical space and time, where action takes place in the physical world, and that you can observe it and perceive it and get affected by it. But there's other levels of reality as well. There is the level which I call the mind space, and
And
there's
what is that?
the mind space is really what's also called the subtle region. It's a level of reality where everything is operating on the basis of thought.
And where is this place?
Well, where is your mind?
So it's an internal. Is it a place or is it an experience?
Well, I think it has to be called a place, but it's not a physical place. One analogy would be when you dream. When you have a dream, that dream to you is a very real experience, but it didn't happen in the physical world. It looked like the physical world, but it wasn't. If you say, well, it was in my head, well, there wasn't enough space in your head to fit it in. So it's a different dimension where the mind is able to create and also to perceive mental images and feelings and just everything that you can have in the physical world, but as a mental, how would you say, a mental form or mental format of it. You can also think of imagination. Imagination is something that is part of your mind. So you want to build a house, so you first have to imagine the house you want to build. So it's there in your mind, you create an image, and then you make that image a practical reality in the material world. So in the mind space, anything can happen, real, unreal, good, bad, anything. It's unlimited. It's like a sort of Sorcerer's Apprentice movie studio, which can produce anything. And so all of your thoughts are there, and your feelings and your memories and so on and so forth. So you can have access to that simply by thinking. Then there's another dimension which is much more subtle than that, where you are just a pure point of light, a conscious being, and absolutely nothing happens there at all. It's the place from where you come and to which you return, having completed your part in the drama of life on earth. And that includes also all your thoughts and feelings and memories and so on in your mind. So, I mean, very few people know about this. And so they all operate as if physical reality is the only thing that's there. But because the laws of spirituality operate on all these different dimensions, they are also affecting what's happening in the physical world, which people who think that the physical reality is the only reality, they cannot figure out why a lot of things are happening, because they discount or don't believe or haven't even heard about something like that. You see?
So when one is introduced to the spiritual reality, and you recognize within yourself that you are empty inside, and you reach someone brings you to the point where you realize that everything else that you've tried to fill yourself up does not work. So now you want to fill yourself up spiritually. Where does one begin that journey? Can you do it by yourself?
Well, in many ways, you have to do it by yourself, but at the same time, you don't do it in isolation. You don't do it totally alone. You have to do your own work, but you do it in a context where you get guidance and teachings and support and this type of thing. Because if you do it totally in isolation, you wouldn't have any reference points. It'd be very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that a person who has tried everything, failed everything, by that time they're in a pretty desperate state.
Which is quite a large percentage of the world.
Yes, that's right. And I think when you're in a desperate state where all your options have run out, you know, the last thing people turn to is God, you see. So then they're starting down at the bottom, really zero. But the other thing that is there are people in this world who are, I would probably say, very naturally spiritual. So they will, in their own way, nurture themselves spiritually. So they will probably not hit that desperate down the bottom stage in quite the same way as somebody who totally denies their spirituality and ends up really low and then turns to God. So I think there are plenty of people like that, but the difficulty for them is that their spirituality is in probably a formal cultural context, which provides them, on one hand, with a good encouragement for their spiritual development, but on the other hand, it's fraught with erroneous concepts, and so then they need to move out of that to develop their spirituality. So whatever it is, you have to move into what I would call unknown territory.
Okay. So Denise, you know, when one looks at normal day-to-day functioning, we all go about our business, whether we feel happy or sad inside, we all go about our daily business. And if you're having a bad day, you go to, somebody you love, a friend, a family member, spend some time with them, and a friend will give you some energy, or just the fact that they love you will give you some energy. Or you read a book, or take a walk in Mother Nature, or spend time with your dog, whatever it is. We all have our fixes, okay? And this is what people use to fix them up temporarily. Now, and relationships also fall into this category. You get something from them. Now, are you saying that these, what is taking all of that do to one's own personal power? Because when you spend time with a good friend, or go for a walk with your dog on the beach, the feeling that you get of feeling good, that's also real. And you do get power from that. But the power that you're referring to is a different type of power.
Yes, you do. You get, but you don't get really much. You don't get enough. And you don't get something that you can hold on to. It's just like a refreshment, but then after a little while, because it's so temporary, you're back where you started. So what you really want is to take in something that you can accumulate. And this is where spiritual power is different from the other sort of ways that we refresh ourselves. And spiritual power, really, you have to build it systematically. And you have to be careful to accumulate more than you use. Because if you accumulate and then you use it all up, you're always going back to zero, which means it's ineffective.
Okay, that is a very interesting statement. You have to accumulate more than you use. So what comes to mind is kind of like a bank account?
Yes.
Does everyone have a bank account?
Everybody has a spiritual bank account. Your karmic accounts is a sort of spiritual bank account.
A spiritual bank account. Okay, tell us more about that. Because when I go to visit my good friend, when I had a bad day, I won't say, listen, I need some energy from you. I need half an hour energy, but I'll sit here for 2 hours because Sister Denise said I've got to accumulate some more for tomorrow. It's not as simple as that, is it?
Well, the thing is, if you start trying to consume energy from a person, you're going to go into debt to that person.
But if it's a symbiotic relationship, how is that a debt?
Well, they're never going to give you enough to satisfy you. So you're always going to want more than they are comfortable giving. And this is why relationships go wrong, because people start to, voraciously consume each other. And then eventually a situation sets in where that's blocked. You just can't take it anymore.
You piqued my interest with the words spiritual bank account. Please tell us more about that.
Every time you do an action, you're doing something positive or something negative. Any normal action, interaction between people and yourself and matter and your work and this and that, it'll be 1-to-1. You make a little bit of effort, you do something good, you get the equivalent back. But what happens is you actually consume a lot more than the positive karmas that you do, which produce a return. And so it's really sorely inadequate. And over the long period of time of a soul's course through human history, the original quantity of energy that a soul came in with is progressively eroded over time, so that you get to a point where you're really empty and you do a little bit of good and get a little bit of energy, but it hardly makes any difference. So then you need to come to a point where you say, okay, I'm going to fizzle out completely here. I have to do something. Like your analogy with the cell phone battery, you have to plug in and you have to leave it on charge until it gets all the way full. But it's not that you can do that for a soul just one time overnight. That's not going to work. Even if you sit for a whole night meditating, it will not be quite enough. So you need to give really quite a substantial time in your day to meditate in a quality way, so that the time that you spend meditating is effective, so that you're really able to, and I use this analogy, download light and power from God to much larger quantities than what you use. And to do that, first of all, you have to make sure that your karma is very good, because if you do a negative karma, everything, drains out very quickly. So keep pure karmas as far as you possibly can. Try to be careful to have relationships where the give and take stays equal, so that you're not in any way using a relationship to resource yourself. You're interacting with people, positive, mutually beneficial give and take as a normal human interaction, but you will not use that person as a source, because you need to use the Supreme Being as your source. And then you have to use sufficient for your needs. And as you start to fill, you begin to realize how empty you are. And you start to understand what your capacity is, because you have to fill to capacity before the subsequent time cycle. So this is something that happens just in this confluence period between one time cycle and another time cycle. So we're going through a very significant period of time where the soul can fill up. At other times, it's not possible.
Yes, so Denise, we on a previous show, when you were talking about the law of karma, I said that most people know about it, and you disagreed with me, and you said if they really knew, they would act accordingly. Why is what you said so difficult to bear and so difficult for people to do? People are instinctively and intrinsically aware that something's wrong inside. Okay, and I find that people engage in all sorts of what I call compensatory behavior to fill up the emptiness inside, and this includes addictions and impermanent relationships and very unnatural and self-defeating behavior patterns. Why is it that so difficult to stop and face the self? What is it about us that refuses for us to look and just accept the wisdom of what you are saying? What is that?
Well, there are several reasons. One of them is it's painful to do that because you have to face the fact that you have been sabotaging yourself and been counterproductive for a long time under the illusion that you've been doing the right thing. So that's a bit painful and a bit upsetting, actually. Another is that there's absolutely no support for this. Everywhere you go, people will give you a very different message from the one that I'm giving. So you will have faith in the message that you're getting. But then if you realize that all these messages that you're getting from the world are false, are not true, that you have been, in a sense, let down and possibly even betrayed by the world that is supposed to be guiding you properly and supporting you, you realize it's been doing the opposite. So then that's very unpleasant feeling. So the other thing is that you have to really reset your thinking, and that's a lot of work. So when you have to reset your thinking, you say, well, how do I do that?
Okay. You want to give us a quick answer to that last one, because I don't want to end off the show on that note.
Well, in order to do that, that's what makes you into a seeker, because you start looking for, well, how do I do that? So you look in different philosophies, different religions, different practices, and so on. And quite possibly you may finally end up with Raj Yoga, which really does, in my opinion, respond absolutely to the requirements of a depleted soul.
Okay, that's a beautiful note on which to end. Raj Yoga responds to the needs of a depleted soul. Okay, that's very beautiful, Sister Denise. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, as always, these talks are too short, but luckily there are far more that we can listen to. Sister Denise, thank you so much. For those of you at home who spent this last half an hour with us, the question that Sister Denise is leaving with you is, what is the level of your own personal power? And interestingly, I think it's your intuition and your gut feeling that will give you the answer to that question. And if it's in the negative or zero, do not feel ashamed or embarrassed. It takes a lot of honesty to get to that point in the first place. There is hope for you, as you can see from the life of a yogi, that you can do something about it, and you can fill yourself up again and become the person that you would like to be. So Mr. Denise has shared a message of how to why we have lost personal power and how to reclaim personal power. I hope this message has been of benefit to you. I certainly have taken a lot from it, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you, and good day to you.